All right, so we're ready to begin. So I wanted to thank you both for joining us today for our very first session on our anti-hate conversations. So before we begin, I just wanted to acknowledge the land that we're working on, that we're living in. So the work of the Council of Agencies Serving South Asians takes place on the traditional Indigenous territories of the Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and the territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit. This territory is part of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, an agreement between the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. This territory is also covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. Today, Takaranto, the traditional Mohawk name of this area called Toronto, meaning a gathering place, and its surrounding areas are still home to Indigenous people, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to meet, work, and play on this territory as settlers. So if you're just tuning in, we're starting our first conversation series on anti-hate. We have two very special guests today. My name is Samia Hassan. I'm not the special guest. I'm the Executive Director of the Council of Agencies Serving South Asians. It's my pleasure to be hosting the first session. I'm going to be hosting the first couple of sessions, and I'm hoping that some of our other staff at CASA will be interested in doing a couple of sessions as well. So today we have two very special guests. We have Avvy Go and Amy Go joining us for this very critical conversation. Today we're going to be talking about some things that you probably are hearing a lot about in the media about anti-Asian racism. And we're seeing an increasing number of hate crimes and hate speech and online hate towards Asian communities. Chinese people from Chinese background in particular. So we're going to be discussing that in detail. But I just wanted to give a bit of background about Avvy and Amy before we dig into some of the specifics. So Avvy Go is the clinic director of the Chinese and Southeast Asian Legal Clinic. She received her BA in Economics and Management Studies from the University of Waterloo, her LLB from the University of Toronto, and her LLM from the Osgoode Hall Law School. Since her call to bar in 1991, she has worked exclusively in the legal clinic system, serving the legal needs of low-income individuals and families, the majority of whom are non-English speaking immigrants and refugees. Immigration, human rights, and employment law are some of the main areas of law that she practices in. Thank you, Avvy, for joining us today. We also have Amy Go, and yes, they're related. Amy Go is a social worker by training and has years of experience working in immigration and with immigrants and seniors through the Wood Green Community Center and the Lee Hong Center for Geriatric Care. Over 3 decades, Amy has advocated for social justice as well as the rights of women and racialized communities. Currently, she's the president of the Chinese Canadian National Council for Social Justice. She served on the boards of national advocacy organizations as well as local social service organizations and social planning bodies. Amy is currently working as a consultant supporting health and social service organizations in strategic planning, program development, reviews, and evaluation. I also wanted to bring up that this is not their entire bio. I had to really cut it down, so please forgive me for that, but they have tons of experience and wisdom, and we'll hear a little bit about it today. So just a little bit of a plug-in. The reason why we decided again to do this is because we've seen in the news about the increasing hate and intolerance in Canada. In this and even in a state of global pandemic. So it's been pretty disturbing to read about some of these incidents that are happening. And at CASA, we saw that there's a need for critical conversations to take place. And we want to be able to support the ongoing anti-hate initiatives that leaders like Amy and Avvy are involved in. So we wanted to limit it to a 30-minute conversation just to keep it very concise and consistent and short. We know that we have a lot of these, virtual conversations and virtual sessions happening. So I know a lot of people are zoomed out right now, a lot of Zoom fatigue going on. So I just wanted to keep it very brief and concise, and so we can really look at what are the issues and talk about a little bit about what the solutions are. So we'll get right into it. So Amy and Avvy, so either of you can take this on. If you can give us a bit of a background, a little bit of context. So I know a lot of folks that are tuning in have seen the news about the increasing hate crimes, hate speech, and online hate towards Asian communities. And Avvy, you shared this morning, we were talking about the piece on Brian Adams. We've seen the comments by Derek Sloan as well. So can you tell us a little bit about what's happening with the communities and what's happening on the ground?
Do you want me to start?
Sure.
Okay. So I guess our clinic first got involved back in January of this year. At that time, when there were over 10,000 parents in the York region who signed the petition asking the various school boards in York region to not allow students who have traveled from China to go to school. And so and at that time we kind of, I think in Canada, people started to pay attention to, the news about some new virus found in Wuhan, China. And then very quickly after that, in like quick succession, we started to hear stories about, for instance, the Chinese restaurants in Toronto and Markham and in other cities in Canada being targeted. There's a restaurant called Wuhan in Toronto, and they were like really being targeted a lot, even though they have nothing to do with the virus. They just, they have the name Wuhan there. And then very shortly after that, Amy could talk about the work that CCNC for social justice has done. But since then, we have heard about many stories of Asian Canadians being attacked on the street, being called names, being denied services. In some cases, like, people being stabbed. There's the case of stabbing in Montreal. There's another case of a 92-year-old senior with dementia being attacked in Vancouver at a local convenience store. And just, people I know, my family, friends who themselves or know someone who have been attacked verbally or physically. So it's really been, sort of like a lot of sort of a series of very racist attacks on Chinese and Asian. And in some cases, people who are mistaken for Asian. There were also Inuit people in Montreal area who were being attacked because they thought the stupid racists they can't even tell the difference. And they just attack them and tell them to go back to their own country. I mean, how ironic is that, right? And of course, many of the people who are being attacked right now, many of my friends, they're like fourth generation Canadians. They've never been to China. Like it has nothing to do with whatever that caused the virus. But anyways, I think I'll let Amy to talk about some of the things that they have heard as well.
Mm-hmm. So, I think since the lockdown, I think even going out shopping for Chinese Canadians is a risk. And so we're hearing amongst our own friends, it's like every time you go out, you are being targeted, or even sitting in the car on the street waiting for someone, you are targeted. So I think it's just, it's really saddening and frightening to hear these stories so close to home, right? So close to your own network of friends. And so I think we're not seeing a decrease. In fact, I think since the lockdown, it's on the rise. And to have public figures like Derek Sloan to make that racist comment about Dr. Theresa Tam, and then now Brian Adams, who blatantly, made that racist tweet. It just, it's just further fanned that fire. These public figures are just making it more justifiable for people to feel that hate or feel that racist attitudes towards Chinese Canadians in particular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's definitely, I think we see that when there's a person of authority or a person in a leadership position that has these kind of comments, it definitely fuels the general public's views. And so I wanted to know, Amy, if you could talk a little bit about the national poll that you conducted and you released the results of that. What did that poll indicate? What were the results of that poll?
Yes, it was shocking to us because we knew that was bad. but we didn't know that it was that bad. So the national poll was conducted in Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. Over 1,100 people responded to the poll through telephone. And we asked questions such as, do you feel safe sitting beside a Chinese without wearing a mask? And 20% say they don't feel safe. Another 20 something feel that they don't know. That means close to 50%. So 1 in 2 Canadians who responded feel that they are not safe to be sitting beside Chinese who is not wearing a mask. But in fact, I don't think, wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, just probably sitting beside a Chinese would be a threat to them. And the more, more disturbing is that 4% agree that all Chinese and Asian carry the virus. All. We have 1.7 million Chinese and more Asian. Every single one of us is seen to be carrying that virus. 10% of those say, I don't know. That means more than 1 in 10. Again, every single Asian looking person would be carrying that virus. And it's the disturbing thing is like it's so irrational, but people actually think that. People actually agree with that kind of irrational statement. And that's why it is so disturbing to get those poll results and to see how deep this racist views are, right? How entrenched these views about Chinese and Asians are.
Mm-hmm. So aside from some of these, public celebrities and figures talking about these racist remarks, where do you think this is coming from? How do people understand for this phenomenon to be something that is not, and for a certain community to be demonized like this? Where do you think this is stemming from?
Well, I'll start. I think it has a lot to do with how Chinese and Asians, in general, not just Chinese, are being they're being perceived by Canadians in the context of the history of Canada. So starting from day one, even with the first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, he once called Chinese strangers in a strange land, sojourners, like these people should not have the right to vote. And that's why he denied Chinese the right to vote in 1885. The yellow peril, the idea that, Asians bring disease to Canada, they are unclean, they are unhygienic, those concepts has long been embedded in the history of Canada. And that has been used historically to justify the exclusion of Chinese and other Asians into Canada. It's reflected in our immigration policy since day one. And I think that concept never goes away. The concept, first of all, that Chinese Canadians and other Asian Canadians are foreigners, like they are not Canadians. That concept never goes away, even for people who have lived in Canada, generations of Canadians being born in Canada, they are still perceived as foreigner. And the second related concept is that these people are dirty. And that really has not gone away. But it is continuing to be reinforced by media, by politicians, by anyone who kind of continue to use those kind of languages, right? Sort of every time there's a virus, starting in Asia, then or even the insects, they will call it Asian hornet, or sort of tying the race to the virus. It's nothing new, and it hasn't gone away.
Just want to also add, just because we're not white, just we will always be seen as foreigners. That, because Canada is seen to be a white country. Only white people are justifiable to be Canadians, and non-whites are not justifiable to be Canadians. So, that we will always be, and for generations, we are always seen as foreigners. And so this, the language of going back, because our loyalty will always be challenged. Our commitment will always be put in doubt. just because we are not white, because Canada has been portrayed and it's ingrained in people's mind, this is a white country. All these non-whites, including Asians, are not to be trusted. And the layer to that is what Avvy said, right? Asians dirty, bringing viruses, unhygienic. Look at Chinatown, and all these. So when disease come, right? And when even when there's no disease, the Asian concept, of these obedient, quiet race, these Asian who don't speak, who are model minority. To me, that is a racist view too. But whenever we have something like pandemic, we become not the model minorities, we are the blame. We are the spread of diseases. We are the dirty people who
Mhm.
bring all these ills and illnesses to Canada. So yes, this is historical, this is entrenched, and it's systemic.
Yeah, so I mean, the issue is multi-tiered, and it has several layers. So how do you and in your organizations, what are some of the things that you're doing to combat some of this anti-Asian racism on the ground? And you've got your work cut out for you, because you've got the institutional layer of it, where you've got the systemic racism, and then down to the communities where there's incidents of crimes and hate speech. So what are you doing at your level to
Yes.
combat with that?
Yeah, so we've been, CCNCSJ has been speaking up, and together with the legal clinic and other partners in the communities, we have not been shy from speaking up and pointing and naming and calling out racism since day one. And recently we've gotten funding from Heritage Canada to do a project together again with the clinic, which is actually the recipient of the fund, but in partnership with CCNCSJ and two other organizations in Toronto and Vancouver, to specifically combat anti-Asian racism in COVID-19. So we are with CCNC Toronto has launched a hate online site for people to report their racist incidents that they encounter. We gather the data, and hopefully, of course, the data will be analyzed and will help inform, us in terms of further actions and what are the remedial strategies that we learn from them. And the other aspects of the project is a social media campaign that we're about to launch. It will be like a public, service announcement type, so that people can, learn that this is stop the spread of racism and face race. Like, we have to confront racism and talk about racism upfront and publicly. And we also will have tools for parents to engage them in discussions with young children about racism and anti-Asian racism. And we also will have a more contextual piece, information, educational piece on our website to talk about the historical aspect and bringing the history to our present, situation of COVID-19 about specifically anti-Chinese and anti-Asian racism. That's so CCNCSJ together with Legal Clinic and others are doing. And I'm sure Avvy on her ground is doing a lot.
Yeah, I guess on top of that, I think the other piece that we're very much focusing on is around the policy piece, because I think ultimately we need the government to take this issue seriously. And so far, other than some kind of a very general comments made by the Prime Minister and some of the ministers in response to some of these racist comments, we have not seen any action on the part of the Canadian government, and it's, I guess, our focus is not just about how do we combat at the moment the anti-Asian, anti-Chinese incident, but how do we address racism in Canada, period? This is an example of how that manifests in Canada, but we really need long-term sustainable policy to deal with this kind of issue so that nobody has to subject to it ever again. So, we've been calling for a stronger sort of policies from Canada, from the Canadian government. And of course, as Samia know, as part of Color Poverty, Color Change, we always call for the collection of disaggregated race-based data, particularly right now to understand how COVID-19 would affect different racialized group differently, not just on the issue around racism, but also the social economic impact as well. I mean, all of that is part of the longer term sort of strategy to deal with racism at its root.
So aside from the policy and the funding, in terms of the roles of the 3 levels of government, what else do you think they could do and they could support in terms of the work that you're doing with combating the anti-Asian racism right now?
So I think each level of government definitely has its current job in combating and speaking up, right? We look to the political leaders to call out. I have not been able to watch TV or listen to the news. I hope Justin Trudeau, our prime minister, has named Brian Adams tweet as a racist tweet and called him out and asked him to apologize. I hope that he has taken leadership, and I would expect other political leaders and civic leaders to do the same. And of course, we also look to each government and to ensure that they have the anti-racism strategies totally incorporated in their own, operations and framework, desegregated data. Unfortunately, Ontario, we lost that, commitment to the anti-racism, action.
No, but they now agree to collect the segregated race-based data
for COVID-19. That's right. But we don't know about the ongoing basis, right? So that ongoing anti-racism work should be totally integrated in the provincial as well as municipal governments, right? In all sectors, in healthcare, in social services, in legal services and justice system, and all the various aspects of our life. And so we hope that, and that's the only way, right? That is the way to really look at such an entrenched and systemic problem, is to address them from all angles.
And what do you think is the role then for organizations like CASA and other organizations that value social justice in supporting the work that you do? And what is the role of community members? So whether it's people from the Asian community or people from other racialized communities and non-racialized individuals as well, what do you think their role is?
I think it's great that CASA is taking this initiative to talk about hate at this current moment. And so we're very honored to be the first guest speakers for your series. And, and this kind of educational events will help us fight against racism as well. And certainly, I think we need to work in coalition across all the different community groups, not just around this particular issue, but sort of around all forms of racism in general. Right now, for instance, some communities will be concerned about how the enforcement of the emergency orders and the additional powers given to police may have impact on other racialized groups, in particular the African Canadian community. So those issues need to be addressed as well. For individuals, I think if they experience racism as a result or during this pandemic, we would certainly encourage them to report these incidents at least to the CCNC-TO website. If it is actually a hate crime, like if they are physically attacked, I would encourage them to call the police because I think we need to hold the police accountable. They need to prosecute those cases at hate crimes as well. And I certainly hope that all Canadians, right-minded Canadians, fair-minded Canadians would call out racism when they see it. And if they are on the Twitter or, whatever, Instagram or whatever, when they saw, comments, racist comments, such as the ones made by Brian Adam, they should call it out.
I totally agree. And I just want to echo what Avvy said, that I think we are all in it together. Unfortunately, at this moment, Chinese or Asian Canadians are bearing the brunt of that and actually shouldering an exceptional burden, in fighting COVID-19 because of all the targeted hatred towards us. However, though, we do recognize that, that hatred could easily, because of a change in situation, would be targeted. Another, just like Islamophobia and, and all these other, racist specific incidents towards other communities. So I think it is important for us to recognize that we are in it together, and all communities, including Chinese Canadians, including the South Asian and other communities, to not to fall prey to division, right? Not to subject ourselves to racist or discriminatory attitudes and discriminatory thinking, thoughts, and because it is out there and it has impacted us. And I can speak for many Chinese Canadians who do have racist views and discriminatory thoughts about other racialized communities, be it African, be it South Asian. So I think it is very important, as Avvy said, to call out racism regardless whether who the target is, right? And to support each other in our continuing journey. That is the only way that we can win this battle.
And this reporting tool that you were describing, Amy, so it's that for somebody that's a bystander as well, or is it somebody that has experienced it only?
It's for both. It's for both. So we are really encouraging people who would witness, right? Because when we know that the victims themselves, many of them would not come out. They are too afraid or intimidated and traumatized by their experience to come out and seek help. We hope that they would, but I hope that the witnesses will come and could come to their aid and help and offer them assistance and help them, complete this tool so that we have the data, so that we know the real situation out there, so that the policymakers, the decision makers will turn their attention to address this problem.
Okay, we'll get that that link from you, and then we'll post it on the comment section of this video. But we're almost out of time. We have 2 minutes left, and I just wanted to turn to you and say, do you have any closing thoughts for our viewers today?
If you want to start.
Sure. So again, I really do very appreciate the work of CASA, and also putting a plug for the Color Poverty, Color Change as well, because I think, as Amy has said again, that we really are in it together. So whether it's COVID or other issues, we should be working and thinking holistically, strategically, as to how all the racialized communities and communities of color can work together to address racism at its root cause, and to hold our government accountable, regardless of who at that particular moment are the target of racism.
Exactly. Thank you. And I also want to echo Avvy's comment, and I want to thank very much CASA for arranging this and for allowing us to share our thoughts with your audience. And definitely we appreciate the collaboration and would really look forward to the collaboration and partnership with CASA and other organizations and the community members to fight this and to combat racism, not just in COVID-19, but in general.
Thank you so much, Amy and Avvy, for joining us today. And thank you for everyone for viewing this important conversation. And for next time, we will be back next Tuesday at 4 o'clock. And we are going to focus, like Amy mentioned, on Islamophobia and some of the increasing incidents that we're seeing in our Canadian cities, especially after some of the municipalities have allowed the mosques to publicly broadcast the call for prayer. There have been some disturbing incidents that have resulted because of those decisions that took place. So thank you, both of you, and we'll see everyone again next week at 4 o'clock.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.